I'm George Galloway, and I present كلمة on Al Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Al Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen television, coming to you from London with an audience of distinguished experts and one or two gifted amateurs like myself. Tonight we're talking about Turkey after the coup that didn't succeed. We'll be asking what its meaning was, who was behind it, and what impact the coup and its failure will have both in Turkey and in the region and in the world. I was live broadcasting on my radio show when the first news came in of aeroplanes in the sky firing on Turkish government targets. I realized that this was the real thing. This was not some rogue pilot taking a pot shot before sailing across the Aegean and seeking asylum in Greece. This was, as it turned out to be, the beginning of a massive conspiracy to overthrow the elected government of Turkey. Now, I should be candid, although none of you watching will be surprised to hear me say I'm against the government of Erdogan. I oppose almost everything that Erdogan has done over the last few years, and I oppose many of the things he's proposing to do now. But I could never support a military junta taking power by force in Turkey. And in that, I was at one with all of the Turkish opposition parties and forces, all of whom, with great alacrity, certitude, and integrity, opposed this military coup from the very first moments. Although some people in the world did not, and I'll come to those in a moment. When Erdogan was first in power, I was one of his admirers. His achievements in the economic field and in the liberation of Turkish Muslim women to practice their faith and dress as they pleased in all parts of Turkish society was something that all right-thinking people should have supported. I knew of the long history of fascism in Turkey, of military dictatorships in Turkey. I knew of the far right's strength and importance in Turkish society. And I believed that Erdogan had the key to a new Turkey, to a new era for Turkey and a better one. His reforms of the economy, the tremendous rates of economic growth which he registered, at some points greater than China's rates of economic growth, were all commendable. His foreign policy of no quarrels with the neighbours was also something of which I heartily approved. And his opening to a peace process with the very large Kurdish minority in Turkey was equally praiseworthy. I supported all of that. But over the last few years, 5 years or so, Erdogan has trashed all of his earlier achievements. He's now at war with millions of Kurdish people in his own country. Kurdish cities in the south of the country look like Aleppo, look like they've been in the Syrian war. The no quarrels with the neighbours became quarrels with all of the neighbours, and not just quarrels, but outright war. Erdogan's joining and facilitating and collaborating in the war to destroy Syria was something I can never forgive. But despite all of that, whatever I feel about Erdogan's regime, a military junta would have made every matter worse. And so I make no apology for being blunt about this. Those who collaborated in the military coup attempt in Turkey are guilty of a great crime. The more so because some of them are his own friends, or at least he thought they were. The United States of America was extremely ambivalent in the first hour or two of the coup, which is when you get to know the real truth. They changed their tune part of the way through the night when it became clear that the Turkish people in their millions were pouring onto the streets of Turkey's cities in rejection of this military junta and its attempt to overthrow democracy in Turkey. NATO, of which Turkey inexplicably to me remains a member, was silent for 7 hours before it said a single word against the military coup. Both of those things tell me that the US and NATO were at least ambivalent about the coup and probably were behind it. The coup plotter, the mystical, some thought mythical cleric Gulen, is ensconced in the United States, living freely and operating politically from there. He has extensive networks throughout Turkey, in the military, in the media, in academia, and in certain parts of civil society, and he was using them to bring about this coup d'etat. It is inconceivable, especially given where Gulen lives, which is very close to the CIA headquarters. It is inconceivable that Gulen's activities in Turkey are not closely monitored by the United States government and security apparatus. If Gulen was involved in fermenting this coup, the United States must have known about it, and they did not tell their Turkish ally, Erdogan, and his government. So who's behind it? I believe malignant forces are behind it. Saudi Arabia may also be involved, though the evidence for that is not yet entirely forthcoming. These are my views. This is كلمة, where every word is free, and so my audience is free now to speak theirs. Who'd like to speak first? Yes, you, sir.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Galway. My name is Haytham Sibahi. I am a Syrian businessman and political analyst.
Welcome.
بالنسبة لأردوغان نحن في سوريا يعني بس منأكد على ما حدث في سوريا وتدخل أردوغان بسوريا. أما بالنسبة للعلاقات الداخلية في أو ما يفعل أردوغان في داخل تركيا فهذا شأن تركي خالص، نحن السوريين لا نتدخل به. لكن ما فعله أردوغان خلال 5 سنوات إذا أخذناها على طريقة الربح والخسارة، أردوغان ربح كثيرا. ربح من تجارة البترول مع داعش، ربح من عمليات الطبابة في اسطنبول اليوم هي أكبر بزنس موجود في اسطنبول. ما يقال عنهم المسلحين والإرهابيين يأتون من ليبيا للطبابة في اسطنبول، يأتون من داعش للطبابة في اسطنبول، يأتون من النصرة للطبابة في اسطنبول، يأتون من كل مكان، وهذا مفتوح لهم، هذا الخط مفتوح لهم. خلال ال4 سنوات الماضية الطيران التركي نحن سميناه في سوريا الطيران الوكيل للإرهاب. أتى بالإرهابيين من ليبيا، أتى بالإرهابيين من مناطق من الشيشان، أتى بالإرهابيين هذا الطيران، وهناك صور مؤكدة في ذلك. أتى من جميع أنحاء العالم ودربوا في تركيا ودفعوا باتجاه سوريا. طبعا أردوغان أو حكومة أردوغان والأشخاص اللي حوالين أردوغان استفادوا من هذا الشيء. السلاح الذي دخل من عدة دول ما يدعى أصدقاء سوريا، هذا السلاح دفع مالا لتركيا لتدخل هذا السلاح من تركيا إلى سوريا. فأردوغان بالنسبة له كانت عملية اقتصادية بحتة واستفاد منها جيدا. لم يعي على جميع الأحوال من قتل، آلاف الذين قتلوا في سوريا، لم يعي من الذين شردوا في سوريا. أردوغان وحكومة أردوغان بالنسبة لنا نحن السوريين استفاد كثيرا من تأجيج القتال في سوريا ومن تأجيج هذه المشكلة أو ما حصل في سوريا بال2011 يعني. وأردوغان مستمر في ذلك، ونحن نقول لن يقف أردوغان إلا إذا المجتمع الدولي أرغم أردوغان على الوقوف. ولا إشارات المشكلة. وهناك يعني مثال، عندما شخص يقتل شخص أو شخصين يدخل السجن، لكن عندما شخص يقتل مئات الآلاف يبقى حرا. والمثال على ذلك توني بلير وجورج بوش.
Well, I agree with all of that, and I have said so on this very show, on this Al Mayadeen television station 100, 200 times. I agree with every word that you said. The 5 years that you mentioned has been a period of disaster for the region, but also for the people of Turkey themselves. The wounds that he has opened up, the doors to terrorist mayhem that he has opened up, have now backfired into Turkey itself. It's only weeks ago that Ataturk airport itself was under terrorist attack from his own friends that he helped cause such chaos in Syria. All of that is absolutely true. But let me ask you one thing. If the problem is that Erdogan is acting as an agent for the United States and imperialism, how would that have been improved by his overthrow by a military junta? The Turkish military is a plaything of imperialism and of NATO. So it follows that all of those bad things that you correctly identified would not have changed for the better and might have changed for the worse if the US puppets in the Turkish military had taken power. That's why in the minutes I had to react, I took a clear line that I stand by now. Whatever the crimes of Erdogan, a military junta would have been worse. Worse for Turkey and worse for the region, including, of course, preeminently Syria, but not only Syria, Iraq, and other tracks also. Therefore, it is correct to oppose the coup. What do you say?
بالنسبة إلي شخصيا وبالنسبة لكثير من الناس، انقلابات من الجيش نحن ضدها على جميع الأحوال. هذا لكن هناك إشارات استفهام في تركيا. فمثلا 20 عسكريا في مطار أتاتورك بمدرعتين وسيارة جيب، هؤلاء لا يحتلوا مطار أتاتورك. الانقلابات العسكرية لها طابعها الخاص. هذا الانقلاب الذي رأيناه أو ما يقال عنه انقلاب في تركيا هو انقلاب عام 1960. الانقلابات العسكرية أولا تسيطر على رأس البلد، على حكومته، ولم يحصل هذا. لم يسيطروا على مطار أتاتورك لأن عدد العساكر أقل بكثير من عدد الموظفين في مطار أتاتورك. هناك إشارات استفهام. وإذا نظرنا إذا ما حصل في تركيا، من الرابح من هذا الانقلاب اليوم؟ وأنا قلت سابقا اليوم أردوغان أصبح يذهب بطريق الدكتاتورية لتصفية جميع خصومه، وهذا ليس عملا ديمقراطيا.
Well, Turkey is not a dictatorship. Erdogan behaves like a dictator.
That's what I
But
mean.
Turkey is not a dictatorship. As a matter of fact, only 50% of the people of Turkey voted for Erdogan. So there are elections. There are opposition parties, powerful ones. Of course, he's all the time trying to encroach upon the democratic space that can be enjoyed and exercised by opposition forces. But that has not yet gone. And I don't believe that it will be able to be gone. Let me ask you something neither of us mentioned. In the few days before the coup, Erdogan had made overtures both to Russia and to Syria. And this could be significant. Maybe this was a trigger for the coup. Maybe the trigger for the coup was that Turkey was kissing and making up with President Putin. And that might be presaging a kiss and make up with Syria. This is also a possibility. It's too early to say whether Erdogan's policy in the region will now get worse or will it get better. What do you say?
Well, I know, and you know, Mr. Galloway, it's the West let any leader slip quite a lot and make mistakes a lot, and it comes time for that leader to go, and that's
I've been warning Erdogan of this for years, by the way.
I always say this is in all what's happened in Syria and ISIS and everything is underground and intelligent war happening now, more underground than above the ground.
Yes, sir? Just say who you are first.
My name is Ratib Al-Suleiman. I'm a Syrian. I live in the United Kingdom the last 25 years. I'm British citizen. أنا شاهدت الإنقلاب العسكري منذ الساعة 7 أو 8 مساء حتى الساعة 3 صباحا، وكنت ألاحظ لحظة بلحظة ماذا يحصل وماذا يقوم به العسكر. شاهدت أردوغان عندما ذهب وتكلم من التليفون الصغير وتكلم مع الجماهير مع الشعب، قال لهم اخرجوا إلى الشوارع، هؤلاء العساكر لا يمثلون الديمقراطية ولا يمثلون الشعب. فشاهدت بأم عيني الشعب التركي جميعا، الصغار والكبار والنساء كلهم ذهبوا إلى الشارع. بعد أن ذهبوا إلى الشارع العساكر أو الجيش شاهدوا هؤلاء الجموع من الملايين أو الآلاف مع الناس، فبدأت العساكر ترمي السلاح، أو بدأت العساكر تستسلم، أو بدأت العساكر تشتبك مع الجماهير. هذا ما دعا العساكر إلى الاستسلام أو إلى الفشل في الانقلاب العسكري. طبعا أمريكا كانت خلال الساعتين الأولى صامتة، وجميع العالم كان صامتا، وأنا شاهدت حتى القنوات الإنجليزية وسكاي نيوز وكل هذه القنوات كانت تحرض على الانقلاب ومع الانقلاب قلبا وقالبا، تقول أنه الانقلاب نجح والانقلاب مشي، والعساكر سيطروا على التلفزيون وأجبروا الفتاة في التلفزيون أن تتكلم أنه العساكر احتلوا البلد والبلد الآن تحت سيطرة العسكر، وهذا لم يحصل إلا ممكن ساعة ولا ساعتين، يعني قليل من الزمن. كل هذه الأحداث حدثت بوقت قصير، وأنا شاهدت كذلك أنه الشعب التركي لم يضع صورة أردوغان أمامه، وضع العلم التركي، لأن الشعب التركي لا يؤمن بالديكتاتور. الشعب التركي عبارة عن ديمقراسي، يؤمنون بالديمقراطية، وكان الناس كلهم يحملون العلم التركي بيدهم، وهذا ما جعل الشعب أو العالم كله يحترمهم. لأننا في البلاد العربية للأسف نرفع شعارات صور القذافي وصور بشار الأسد وصور صدام حسين وصور رؤساء العرب، وهذا شيء مخزي، لأن هؤلاء الأتراك أثبتوا للعالم كلهم أن الديمقراطية حرة، وهم يتكلمون الديمقراطية ويحبون الديمقراطية، ولا يرغبون أبدا بأن يرجع حكم العسكر إليهم، لا يريدون حكم العسكر مطلقا، لأنهم يؤمنون بالديمقراطية. وكذلك الشكر الكثير لتركيا، للشعب التركي طبعا ولتركيا، لأنه لديهم 2 أو أكثر من 2 سوري، وهؤلاء السوريين عبارة عن لاجئين. أنا أستغرب جدا يعني من الدول العظمى وخاصة أمريكا كلها لا يوجد فيها ما يقارب المئات من اللاجئين السوريين، أما تركيا فيوجد لديها 2 لاجئ تركي، 2 لاجئ سوري. هؤلاء اللاجئين طبعا حمل أو عبء كبير على تركيا، وطبعا نشكر هؤلاء الناس، الشعب التركي الذي وقف بجانب هؤلاء السوريين الذين هربوا من الدمار ومن القتل ومن التشريد ومن الجوع ومن الألم، دشروا منازلهم وجاءوا إلى تركيا، وتركيا حمتهم وأوجدتهم. والآن نجد بريطانيا وأمريكا والدول الأوروبية يعني للأسف يتباكوا من اللاجئين السوريين، يقولون أنه اللاجئين جابوا عبء كبير علينا واللاجئين كذا واللاجئين، وللأسف يعني اللاجئين لم يكون لهم عبء على أي دولة، اللاجئين قدموا الكثير.
I'm going to answer that after this. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, but discussing Turkey and its place in the region and in the wider world. Before the break, we heard a very powerful and eloquent exposition from a Syrian British citizen of 25 years now in Britain. He was personally very kind and very eloquent, as I said, but he was also very substantially wrong. And this is why I must now argue with you, as I said that I would. First of all, there are a number of things you said that I agree with. Institutions are what make a democracy, not votes. Voting every 5 years, there's nothing particularly great about that, especially if you don't know who's counting them. But having institutions which can absorb shocks and which can survive and which have integrity and which have a kind of independence in national life is a vital prerequisite of a democratic society. And Turkey has that. It's had many dictatorships before, but it has that despite Erdogan's very frequent riding roughshod over democratic norms in Turkey. The facts are, his is an elected government, and that makes it better than any unelected government. Because if you elect a government, you can unelect it. If there's no democracy, you can't. It's true, secondly, that the Turkish people are a highly developed civilization. It was very telling that what they carried to the street was their national flag. They didn't carry the picture of Erdogan. They didn't carry the insignia of the AKP. They carried their national flag. They believe that their country, their society, their state is worth defending and worth preserving. And they're surely right about that. Where you went very badly wrong, if you don't mind me saying, although before I come to that, it's true also that the Turkish people have absorbed 2 million Syrian refugees without any signs of the ugliness that has appeared in Europe over the presence of far fewer. On that, I take my hat off to the Turkish people too. But there wouldn't be any refugees if it wasn't for Erdogan. There would be no Syrians in Turkey. They'd all be in Syria if it wasn't for Erdogan. So to praise him for welcoming Syrian refugees that he created is perverse, to say the least. It is the Turkish state has been the gate for all of the disaster that has befallen your country. You can be, I infer that you are, not a fan of the government in Damascus. I'm not myself a fan of the government in Damascus. But Syria is a country, a state, a society that has been systematically destroyed by Western governments using Gulf money and using Turkey as the tool, the gateway and the tool. So I can never forgive Erdogan, never forgive Erdogan for the role that he has played in destroying your country. And I'm surprised that you are able to forgive him when I can't forgive him. Go on.
I disagree with you, Mr. Galloway, because I don't think Erdogan, he has the problem in Syria. The problem in Syria, it's a government destroyed their own people, a government dropping bomb on the people. Erdogan, he doesn't drop bomb in Syria. Erdogan,
No, he sends men with bombs.
he doesn't send men. These men, actually, when they cross, I've been to Turkey personally myself. These men, they've been like from all over the world, not actually from Turkey.
How did they get into Syria?
They travel the same as...
Through Turkey.
Yes, I agree with you, but Turkey, what they going to do? It's a people traveling, nobody know anything about them. At the
Nobody
beginning,
knew there was a war going on?
At the beginning, I
And all
know.
these young men were turning up?
I see them in my own eyes.
With their long beards?
Yes, I see them in my own eyes, but there is no suspicion or there is no any problem with these people. They travel, most of them, they are educated, they have a passport, they are, some of them British, some of them from Afghanistan, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, from all the world.
Well,
we as a
I
Syrian...
hope you're never in charge of our border security. let me tell you that. Anyway, let's move on. Gentleman at the back, Dr. James.
Well, I wanted to agree with the man at the front, and I'm afraid also to disagree with you about the who's responsible.
Always a pleasure to disagree with you.
Yes, the who's responsible for the destruction of Syria. Again, I hold up the Yinon plan, hatched by Oded Yinon in 1986 and endorsed by Netanyahu in 1996. It was called a clean break, a new strategy for securing the realm, and it talks here about establishing in the Syrian territory attacks emanating from Lebanon by Israeli proxy forces. And this is the Israelis talking, telling us what they are up to.
Erdogan is best friends with Israel.
Well, he was. Now,
No, he is again.
He
just
was.
met Netanyahu and shook hands again.
Yes, but recently, as you said earlier, he's been shaking hands with Russia and Mr. Putin as well. He's also reduced his attacks on Syria, or the attacks that he's been allowing to come in, as you put it. So I guess that Mossad probably had something to do with the coup in order to bring him down and create the chaos that they've already earmarked for Syria, carried out in Iraq, and carried out in Lebanon as well, just as they said they would.
Okay, but the man at the front says that the fault for what's happened in Syria is the president of Syria. You say it's Israel.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not ruling out the role of both in this. I'm sure both have played a part in bringing us to this pass. But what cannot possibly be contradicted is that 100,000 foreign jihadists, as they call themselves, have been permitted to enter Syrian territory through Erdogan's Turkey. They have been armed there and supplied there. Erdogan has bought the stolen oil stolen by these people from Iraq and Syria. Erdogan has treated the injured of the Takfiri militias, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, only 2 of them. Don't forget, the moderates in Syria just filmed themselves sawing the head of a 13-year-old Palestinian child and holding it up. They're the moderates, by the way. That's the so-called free, so-called Syrian, so-called army, the ones we're giving money and weapons and support to. And Erdogan is in bed with all of these people.
Well, surely that can be explained by Israel as well. The Israelis want to see the Yarmulke camp reduced to ashes and the Palestinians deprived of any kind of home anywhere.
But they didn't enter Syria through Israel. They entered through Turkey.
Yes,
Why
well,
are you so keen to
was,
wash that away?
Israel doesn't want to be seen to be behind this.
But why is Erdogan doing it? He's supposed to be an Islamist.
Yes, but he's also wanting to be on the right, has been wanting to be on the right side of Israel because it's a powerful country. Do you remember what happened to the
That's a
Murray
strange
Marva?
kind of Muslim brotherhood, that.
Well, he
That
clearly
wants to be
is.
on the side of Israel because it's a powerful country.
Well, he's
I thought the Muslim Brotherhood existed for the Muslims.
Well, I mean, there are conundrums here. He sponsored the Mavimara aid ship to Gaza.
He did?
And it
What
was
did
bombed.
he do about all the martyrs on board?
Well, he was again, I suppose, pressurized by Israel not to do anything.
Oh, James.
Well,
Anyway,
don't you know
it's a
about the
pleasure.
power of Israel?
Pleasure to disagree with you. Let's take the gentleman in the middle first, then we'll come back to you, sir.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Galloway. My name is Saman. I'm a video editor. I have to have a look at my notes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
You've got to get
just
to my age not to need notes.
Till now, just after the coup, 15,000 of teachers been fired. 1,500 of university presidents and college presidents
Deans, yeah.
forced to resign. More than 8,000 of police officers been arrested. 112 generals been arrested. And I can count all day long. My list is too long. Isn't it a kind of coup d'etat? Isn't it a kind of coup?
No. If I were Erdogan, I'd arrest all the generals. In fact, if I was running any regime, I'd retire every general in the land. Because history is studded with generals who try to overthrow or subvert the government that they're supposed to be serving. If Mr. Bhutto had sacked all the generals in Pakistan, he wouldn't have been hanged, and the whole future of Pakistan wouldn't have been besmirched. If you're going to come to power and change things, the last thing you can afford is having hostile, politicized generals in the pay of foreign powers. Morsi, for example, would still be the president of Egypt if the American financed and trained generals hadn't overthrown him. So if Erdogan feels that all of these generals, 115, that's not the majority of them, by the way, 115 generals can no longer be trusted, this is his right. He's the president of the country.
It's not just about generals, you know, about teachers,
I'm coming
imams.
to that. This Gulen movement, this Fethullah Gulen, sitting in Virginia or Pennsylvania, cheek by jowl with the American security apparatus, living there under the tutelage of the American government. He's an American agent. And his role in this coup cannot seriously be denied. They have the encrypted communications, which they've now published. If Gulen is sitting in America, acting as an American agent against the Turkish state and its elected government, then all of its collaborators are lucky they're only under arrest. In many other countries, they'd already been shot by now. So this purge may, of course, punish innocent people. That's possible in a big mess like this one. But the state has a responsibility to defend itself and its institutions that we talked about earlier, and its democracy, which it's not denied, continues to exist in Turkey. So this is a Turkish matter, frankly. This is an internal Turkish matter. Who gets arrested for plotting or being involved with plotters? This is a matter for the Turkish government, surely.
If Golem follows like American politics, how I think myself, America wants Erdogan to stay in power.
Didn't look like that in the first few hours of the coup.
Well, I don't think so.
Let me give you John Kerry then. He does reflect the American government's view. He's the Secretary of State. His first two statements made no reference whatsoever to the need to defend the democratic elected government in Turkey. His first two statements stressed only the need for stability. They were completely neutral on who should govern Turkey. Only his third statement introduced the question of defending the democratic government of Turkey. And NATO was a dog that didn't even bark until the 7th hour. They were completely silent, with not a word, even though Turkey is a member of NATO. NATO has bases in Turkey, even nuclear weapons in Turkey. But NATO could say no word about a military coup going on in their country. This tells me, and I've been watching politics and doing politics a very long time, this tells me that the US and NATO were in the coup and only spoke when they knew the coup was lost. That gives me some hope that we can persuade Erdogan that he's been teaming up with the wrong friends, that his wrong friends were the people that tried to kill him. And they did try and kill him, by the way. In Marmaris, they attacked his house in order to try and kill him. They were, as you said, in the 1960s terms, it was a bit of a comic opera coup. They did everything wrong that they needed to get right, and that was one of them. So, for me, I have no problem with what might appear a dualism. I'm completely against Erdogan. And I've said 100 times on this very show why. But I'm against American NATO military coups more. Who'd like to come in? Yes, gentlemen. Sorry, you want to come back?
Sorry,
go ahead, go ahead.
One more point. You know, if I think it was a show, myself, because if a coup been supported by these people, at least it couldn't be stopped in just few hours. And that's it.
No, I don't agree. Turkey is a highly developed, highly politicized society. The masses came onto the streets in their millions. And as Iran and its revolution showed, popular power cannot be defeated. The soldiers don't have enough bullets to shoot millions of people. And they know when they run out of bullets, they'll be torn to pieces. So they don't shoot. I'll be right back after this. You're watching كلمة with me, George غالاوي, on Al television, coming from London, discussing Turkey. Before we continue with the studio discussion, we earlier took the كلمة camera out onto the streets of London to hear the voice of the people. This is what it sounded like.
Will Turkey now close the borders for ISIS after the recent attack in Istanbul's airport?
I think they should have closed it longer ago, but I hope they do now.
I think they should strengthen their borders, without a doubt.
It's going to be difficult for them to close the border. They may try other methods, but it'll be difficult for them to close their borders.
Probably, yeah. I've got a feeling they might do. It's going to be difficult for them to kind of keep control after obviously what's happened in the last couple of days, so possibly.
people always find ways to get in anyway. So no matter how much they try and stop, it still does, people find ways out.
I think they should take whatever controls they see fit to protect the population they have in an inclusive way that includes the Kurds and, everybody who's there.
You can only make them secure to a certain extent. And actually, I think the experience around Europe has shown that it's not necessarily those who are coming across borders to commit atrocities, it's those that might be already within a country who then feel motivated to carry out an attack. So I don't know whether they will or they won't, but it might not make much difference.
Do you think, in your opinion, is Turkey supporting ISIS financially through the purchase of oil?
Well, that's a difficult question. I would say yes, but I have no proof to back this up, so it's just a finger in the air comment, but yeah.
Well, if that's true, and I don't know whether it is or not, then I would suggest that it probably is, because it's a revenue stream.
Is Turkey supporting ISIS financially through the purchase of oil?
I don't know, and I don't think they should be supporting, and I don't think they are supporting, so I don't know.
No, I think there are many factors. Oh, it might be one. I just don't think it's the main one.
We hear rumours to that extent, but I have seen no proof to support that theory.
Again, it's one of those things that they're obviously going to have to continue trading, and the country's going to have to continue using oil. So they do, but it's the devil in the deep blue sea. They're going to have to, but obviously it affects what people think of them at the same time.
Well, some clever comments there. We are talking about the meaning of the coup in Turkey and what will flow from it. Gentleman in the front row is next.
My name's Amir Belim. I just want to ask you, from a business perspective, a Turkey without Erdogan and without debt, would that be useful for the EU to use as a prop-up after Brexit, or is that too much of a stretch?
No, I don't think that the EU will get any more deeply involved with Turkey. In fact, I think they will now backpedal. They did put Turkey on a kind of express highway, and they were talking about visa-free travel, not free movement of labour, but visa-free travel. I don't think either of those will survive. Turkey is just too unstable a country, playing just too controversial a role in international politics at this time for the EU to get closer to Turkey. Public opinion would just not accept it. In fact, one of the factors that moved the British majority against staying in the EU was the belief that Turkey was headed inwards to the EU. And if that was the feeling in Britain, which is very far away from Turkey, you can be sure that the EU countries closest to Turkey feel that even more intensely. Yes, sir.
So, I had a question to ask you. Do you think the purges that are occurring in Turkey as a result of the failed coup are going to result in taking Turkey down a route similar to Soviet Union or perhaps the French Revolution, where people are taken out of their positions based on suspicion and consolidating the power of Erdogan and his government?
Well, I don't think when you've experienced a coup of this magnitude, and it was a very real coup, hundreds of people were killed and thousands of people were wounded. There were real brutal, violent confrontations took place. The institutions of the state were attacked. Turkish television, the Turkish parliament was bombed. All kinds of ministries and institutions were seized by people in uniform on tanks and so on. This is not a small thing. So you have to have a crackdown after such an event, or there might be a second coup. So, of course, one encourages the Turkish government to behave responsibly and not make their problems worse than they were before. And one has no guarantee that that's what they will do. At the same time, you can hardly criticize Erdogan for now weeding out generals and police officers and so on that were found to be complicit in the coup. Let's take a lady at the end here.
Hi, George. My name is Zahra Sabaiti. My question is, in the long run, do you think the West will still be backing Erdogan? Because, as you know, America has a new policy because Erdogan hasn't been able to control the jihadists and the Islamists because they've just gone completely wild. So do you think they'll continue to keep backing Erdogan? Or, well, that's if he still rules in the long run.
Well, let me put it a different way. The fact that Erdogan has been openly, brazenly collaborating with the ISIS Al-Qaeda assault on Syria means that the Western countries were also supporting them, because otherwise Erdogan could not have done it. He is a member of NATO, an ally of America, an ally of Israel, which he just reconsummated in the few days before the coup. So if all these people are with Erdogan, Erdogan cannot be carrying out what is essentially a war against his neighbor without the support of these Western countries. This is why I have always believed that the West, covertly and overtly in the fact that they're openly supplying the so-called free, so-called Syrian, so-called army that cut the head off the Palestinian child and filmed themselves doing it just this week. So the question is Erdogan going to continue to follow the West's policy in the region, or is he going to use this wake-up call to realize who's who and what's what in the region? I hope, of course, the latter. I have some hope of the latter. I'm hoping that his meeting with Putin, his overtures, there weren't really overtures, but his messages to Syria, the fact that there has been some tightening up, now way too late on the border, indicates perhaps a recalculation. After all, it's not just that Syria has been destroyed over the last 5 years. Turkey itself is now in danger of disintegration. As I said to you, there are cities in the Kurdish areas in Turkey that look like Aleppo. They've been bombed, shelled, attacked from the air in their own country, by their own country's air force. There's a full-scale war against the Kurdish people going on. And half of the people, almost, are against the Erdogan government. But all of them opposed the coup. If I were Erdogan, I would draw certain conclusions from that and correct mistakes, worse than mistakes, that have been made. Only time will tell. And if God spares me and I'm still presenting this show, I'll definitely be commenting on that. Now, the gentleman at the front, our expert.
نقطتين سريعتين. بالنسبة عندما نقول أن هناك عناصر إرهابية دخلت تركيا من تركيا إلى سوريا، هذا يعني أن هناك عناصر، وهذا مثبت، مدرجة على لوائح الأمم المتحدة والولايات المتحدة وأوروبا أنها عناصر إرهابية دخلت إلى إسطنبول، ومنها تدربت بقرب إنجرليك ودخلت إلى سوريا. وهذا يعني أن المخابرات التركية وحكومة أردوغان متعاونة مع هؤلاء. هذا من ناحية. أما ما نقول مستر غالاوي، أما ما تقول عن أردوغان أنه منتخب ديمقراطيا، نعم هو منتخب ديمقراطيا، لكن ما يفعله ليس ديمقراطيا. ولا ننسى أبدا أن هتلر أيضا كان منتخب ديمقراطيا وغير الطريق.
What about the lady at the back? Would you like to speak?
اسمي ثناء نعمان من اليمن. عندي تعليق بسيط للي يقولوا إنه لمن يقول أن تركيا، لماذا تركيا بالذات؟ فسؤالي هو عن لماذا لا يدخل الجهاديون من الأردن مثلا أو لبنان؟ لماذا من تركيا بالذات؟ فهنا يكمن السؤال بالذات.
Well, it's impossible for them to go from Lebanon because of the very powerful presence of the liberation movement Hezbollah in Lebanon. They would never permit the trafficking of these takfiri fanatics, these heart-eating, head-chopping mutilating, crucifying mass murderers, they would never permit it to happen. So it can't happen from there. It can't happen directly from Israel for the reasons that Dr. James sitting next to you pointed out. They don't quite want to be seen in that light, and in any case it would be rather dangerous for them to accept 100,000 extremists passing through their country on the way to a big war in Syria. So Turkey is the only place. But there's nothing theoretical about this. It's widely known and accepted that they passed through Turkey and that they come and go. Two of the mass murderers in the Bataclan affair in Paris were traveling back and forward from Syria through Turkey to Europe to carry out terrorist attacks. And they were never once stopped by the Turkish regime. So Erdogan has a lot of blood on his hands, not just Syrian blood, European blood also. And his use of the refugees, turning on and off the tap for political purposes, has also not been missed by European public opinion. But the facts remain that Turkey is a great country. It's a country of 90 million people with an ancient civilization, with a powerful economy, with an industrious labor force, with a geostrategically important position on the map. So everyone has to pay attention to Turkey and what happens in Turkey. And my point is that having another group of military goons in charge of a powerful country like that would have been very, very bad news. Yes, the lady at the front.
Hiya, I'm Batul Sabeti. So given that Erdogan is such a loyal follower and such a loyal puppet of the US, then why did they instigate this coup against him?
Not loyal enough. Not loyal enough, not as loyal as a puppet general, and damaged goods whose credibility is widely in doubt in international public opinion, and potentially capable of great swings. I've lived through them. You see, I was involved in the Mavi Marmara affair. He sent the ship with all flags flying, and he did a great thing. He did other great things for the Palestinians also. When he walked off the stage in Davos, for example, calling Shimon Peres a child killer. These were great things. And his response when Israel murdered our comrades on the decks of the Mavi Marmara was very strong and very firm. And at that moment, his standing in the Arab and Muslim world had never been higher. But look what he did afterwards. He accepted the Israeli crime of the Mavi Marmara. He quickly restored military cooperation between the Muslim Brotherhood government in Turkey and the Zionist settler state under Netanyahu. You really couldn't make that up. Then he restored full diplomatic relations. My point is, he's capable of extreme positions. And maybe the US were beginning to suspect that he might be ready to perform another one in relation to Syria. And this they could not accept. Only time and documents will tell. We'll learn more when we see the translation of WikiLeaks. 300,000 cables and telegrams. Wallah, I love WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks. More of this after the break. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, for Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, discussing Turkey. Now, as I told you earlier, we did have the كلمة camera out on the streets to hear the voices of the people. Let's hear some more.
Do you think that the coup that recently happened is a result of the way that Turkey has tolerated ISIS?
Well, I don't think there should be any relation with that, but I think it was pre-planned, and I would salute the people of and the nation of Turkey. They did a great job.
Possibly. It's another of those things, you know. Have they, haven't they? Everybody's different opinion, and obviously it only needs a few people to stir up emotions for things to kind of take a life of their own, so possibly.
I'm not an expert by any means on what's happening in Turkey, but I think a coup or an attempted coup, I think it's got an awful lot of different factors influencing it. That possibly was one of them, but I think there's probably other more long-standing issues to do with the changes in Turkey's governance structure from a parliamentary towards a presidential arrangement, and the tensions between a secular and more religious feeling in the country. I think those things are just as important.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, obviously, you know, if someone has been in position for a long time, there will be some elements in the society that are not happy with the way things are run, and you know, hence probably what's happened. But even then, still, I really don't support, like a coup. Democracy is quite important in any country. For people in a country to have their say of who rules the country.
Can the recent coup trigger or cause further suicide attacks in Turkey?
I hope not, and I fully trust the president. He's a great guy, and I hope he would manage.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. It would happen. Because, I mean, with the elements of people that are not really happy about what's going on, and just like you mentioned, you know, there's factions, different factions in every country anyway. So there will be an element of that happening.
I think that Turkey has been put in a really hard position, and that it has probably made the best call it possibly could, given that its borders are right on the adjoining scene of warfare.
Absolutely, yes. Like, it's just it's a platform that many people feel that it's their way of expressing their opinion, and yeah, I think it can have a domino effect, unfortunately.
Well, I too salute the people of Turkey for coming onto the streets in their millions and facing the tanks and the guns and the jets and the military helicopters. It is a phenomenal achievement to have so quickly defended your country and its institutions and dispatch these thousands, it now turns out, of plotters and coup makers. It's partly that Turkey has been here before. There have been, in my lifetime, at least 4 military juntas in power in Turkey, and no good came of any of them. Torture, disappearance, mass murder, the complete shutdown of all democratic life have all occurred 4 times in Turkey in my own lifetime, never mind before that. But that doesn't mean I'm saluting their president, though it would be nice if later one felt able to. Lady at the end.
Hi, you've mentioned earlier that Turkey is a good friend of America and they are allies and they do job together. Is ISIS a made-up enemy to keep the world busy for now, while the West and the US reform their economy, their defense, their organizations, because in the past few years, the West, especially America, lost its integrity, credibility. Obama is not doing a good job, as we all know. So is ISIS a made-up enemy?
No, there's nothing made up about it. I, against my better judgment, watched the video I referred to earlier of a child having his head sawn off and then held aloft. I heard the ISIS operatives, or rather FSA operatives, filled with this Al-Qaeda ISIS mentality, discuss whether they ought to have boiled him alive rather than cut his head off. These are real things. And the people doing the head cutting were not Americans. No. They weren't Israelis.
They
As a matter of fact, they weren't even foreign fighters. They were Syrians. They were Arabs.
They don't have to. I'm not talking about their backgrounds. I'm talking about
okay, but
ISIS.
What I'm saying is nothing made up about it. All this blood that has flown, oceans of blood, is real blood. and it's being shed by real people.
But if they know where ISIS is, why don't they just catch them?
That doesn't mean
if
it's
they
made
know.
up. If your question is the West covertly backing these people and even overtly backing them, the answer is yes. I said so already. In fact, they have been from the very beginning. And they backed what became Al-Qaeda from the very beginning. I was the last man standing in the British Parliament when these people came to power in Afghanistan in the 1980s. And Mrs. Thatcher was our Prime Minister then. And I said to her, across the chamber, face to face, you have opened the gates to these barbarians, and a long dark night will now descend on the people of Afghanistan. I never said a truer word. So even then, I could go back further to the Western government's subversion of the Egyptian government of Gamal Abdel Nasser, for example. I could go back to the overthrow of Abdul Karim Qasim in Iraq and his replacement with the Ba'ath Party. The Western governments have, for the best part of 3/4 of a century, been involved with these extremist fanatic groups and have used them for what they thought were their own purposes, only to discover later, as Dr. Frankenstein did when he built a monster in his famous story, that once you've built the monster, you no longer control it. That's why it's called a monster. And so it's not made up by the West, but it's definitely in league with the West, has been used by the West, but it comes, I'm afraid, out of the Muslims themselves. It comes out of the Muslim Ummah itself. It didn't need a Frenchman or an Englishman or an American or an Israeli to invent it.
To me personally, it does not make any sense. They know where they are, they know who they are. They still fight in Kurdistan, Iraq, Syria, and they can't just stop them where they come from.
Well,
Turkey,
one of the reasons why they can't
Turkey is
is they're not
benefiting from the
prepared to
war in
invade.
Syria.
No, they're not prepared to invade. That's one problem for them, because they know that their public opinion will not accept substantial casualties. I mean, France just lost 4 people fighting in Libya today, which is a major problem for Hollande, because he didn't tell the French people or the French Parliament that they had soldiers fighting in Libya. And they didn't tell them because they know the public will not accept it. So discredited is the war party in Western countries that they have to secretly hide the wars that they're now involved in. So they can't defeat ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the FSA and all these other goons, partly because they cannot invade and fight them on the ground. They can only bomb. But of course they could do far more than they are doing, and they are not. They could freeze all the bank accounts. They could stop the stolen oil being sold. They could do many, many things, but they don't, because they are objectively in alliance with these people. Because just as they did in Afghanistan in the 1980s, they have concluded that my enemy's enemy is my friend. That's the approach they took in Afghanistan. Their enemy was the Soviet Union, so anybody fighting the Soviet Union was their friend, even if their friend was worse than their enemy. And the same is true now in Syria and Iraq. Dr. James was gesticulating at the back. Let's hear from him and from the gentleman at the end of the back row.
Just that I feel one is the media and the West are unfairly demonizing the people in so-called the Islamic State, whereas we caused the Islamic State to grow up as a result of bombing Iraq, helping the Israelis to decimate the Palestinians. That causes aggro, and this is what you're seeing as a result. These people are saying to themselves, as far as I can see, we want an Islamic caliphate to get the region back into Islamic control, perfectly reasonable.
But they're waiters from Guildford.
Well, they probably feel sympathetic like I do.
Well, but how can a waiter from Guildford have the right to go to Syria and cut a Palestinian boy's head off, and you call that unfairly demonising?
Well, no,
what kind of an idea of Satan do you have?
You've just said yourself that the CIA, well, you didn't say the CIA, but I know the CIA and Mossad have infiltrated ISIS, and they are the people carrying out these.
That was cutting the
They're
child's
the
head
people.
off.
They actually admit it. There's an Israeli colonel was captured in Jordan, would you believe, and he was found to have been one of those people. He boasted about it.
It wasn't an Israeli colonel cutting the child's head off. He was a Syrian speaking Arabic with a Syrian accent. He was a Syrian. He's now named. His picture is everywhere.
Well, I dare say the Israelis are quite capable of getting other people of Arabic origin to do their dirty work.
No, he's known. The people know who he is. His neighbours are talking about him. For God's sake, man. Let me hear from the gentleman at the end.
Some people say this was a Erdogan shows, and some say no, this was a real coup. I want to know Turkey perspective in the future with this situation.
Well, it was a real coup. Real people were killed in it. Many real people were wounded in it. We all saw it on television. There were real guns, real planes, real bombs. And it was defeated by popular power, and we should rejoice at that. Certainly Iran did. Was very clear from the very first minute, rejecting this coup, as was correct. That's what they should have done. And others who should have known better should have done the same when Morsi was overthrown by the same kind of military goons in Egypt. Not because we loved Morsi, I never loved him, but because a military junta in the pockets of the United States overthrowing an elected government 1 year after its election is a big crime that no good can come from a big crime like that. So there was nothing fake in my view about the coup. If there was, the Americans would have denounced it from the first. NATO would have denounced it from the first. If it was a fake coup that was intended to strengthen Erdogan, his friends would have been in on it, and they would not have tacitly supported the coup if they knew that it was a fake and was doomed from the beginning. We're running out of time. I want some people who haven't spoken yet, if that's possible.
I have another question.
It would appear so.
If you say it's not fake, why they didn't arrest any official government?
They did.
No, they didn't.
They arrested the head of the army. They took control of 2 ministries. They took control of the television. What I think is likely is that Erdogan had several hours' notice of the coup taking place. Look, you've got to hand it to Erdogan. He's a pretty cool customer, and he's a pretty tough guy. And he handled this coup with aplomb, and he's now using its consequences with even greater aplomb. It's a lesson to Venezuela and to all these other places around the world that are facing the possibilities of coups. Study how Erdogan handled the Turkish coup. I'm certainly studying it. You've been marvellous. I've been George Galloway. This has been Kalima Horra for Al Mayadeen Television.